Welcome, ladies. I'm so happy to see all of your beautiful faces. This is so much fun. Wow, so great. Okay, so is everybody, oh, there's two more people in the waiting room. Tabitha, I don't want to start, I don't want to miss anybody. Ooh, wow. Okay, we're getting ready for Passover. Is everyone in the midst of all their preparations? So, okay, I want to wait for Cindy to come in. Oh, okay. Can't wait for everybody to come in. See, people are just joining every second. Okay, I am jumping right in. I am so thrilled to be here with you guys to study our next heroine and to have a special guest as we announced. So this is a packed day we have for us here ahead. Okay, so last month we studied Esther. And before studying Esther, I shared with you the kind of overarching idea of this course, which is to try to understand the heroines of the Bible because the heroines in the Bible are not the same as the male heroes. They do incredible things. They save lives. They bring salvation, but they aren't ever really called upon and they're not promised things that are going to be exactly the way they want them to be. They're not anointed, but yet somehow they transform themselves in a way that allows them to bring transformation around them. And that's what makes them, I think, so remarkable because it's so much closer to real life. It's so real because most of us are not promised anything or given any direct instructions. And we're just kind of stumbling around life trying to figure things out. And so were the heroines of the Bible. They're so real, they're so relatable. So if we can crack what makes them tick, maybe if we can understand what allowed them to do these extraordinary things, then maybe we can apply those characteristics to our own lives and become women of valor in our own right, in our own families and in our own endeavors. So when we looked at Esther, it was easy to pinpoint that that kind of apparent conversation where everything seemed to click for her. And she went from being passive to being active. And we talked about what was said and why that was so meaningful to her and what was between the lines and what made that so transformative. This month, with the month of Nisan and coming upon the celebration of the Exodus, I want to talk about Miriam. But Miriam is a little bit trickier than Esther because there's this massive gap between what we know about Miriam, like let's say as a title, versus what we actually know about her and how she got to be that. Just to give you guys kind of an example of like this gap, if you look in the book of Micah in chapter 6, verse 4, Micah is expressing God's anger at the betrayal that Israel has betrayed him. And he says, "What have I ever done bad to you that this is how you behave?" And as an example of his love and caring for Israel, he says, "Look what I've given you." He says, "For I brought you up out of the land of Egypt, and I redeemed you from the house of slavery, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam." And when you read this verse, it's kind of like, wow, because in the Torah, we hear a lot of stories about Moshe, about Moses, and tons about Aaron with all of his priestly responsibilities. And when he's speaking for Moses in front of Pharaoh, Miriam, we feel really connected to her. And we know that she's this great leader, but we only actually meet her 4 times. And if you could even call it that, because we have one time we meet her at the Nile watching over her baby brother. One time we meet her at the splitting of the sea. One time she gets leprosy, and then we hear that she died. And after she died, no one has water. So we can kind of infer that she was blessing everyone with water, but there's not even a story about that. It's like her lacking is the last story that we get. But there she is in the book of Micah as the front row of leadership, meaning clearly there's a lot packed into a little bit of information that we get from the Torah. And now look what she's called at the sea. This is also really interesting. It says Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women came out with her with timbrels and with dances. Now, usually when we read that verse, we like are so moved by how she's leading everyone in this praise and song. But actually, something really interesting kind of sneaks its way into the beginning of that verse. Miriam the prophetess. Now, you guys can check me on this. No one in the Torah is nicknamed prophet in their name. Like we hear of tons of people getting prophecy. None of them are nicknamed so and so the prophet in the Torah, and not one of them, besides for Miriam. Many of the great leaders have these kind of reference names, like Abraham, Avraham, we call him Avraham our father, like Avram Avinu. Joseph, we call him Joseph the righteous, Joseph a tzaddik. Moses, we call him Moses our rabbi. Aaron the priest. The only person in the 5 books to have prophet in their title is Miriam. And to this day, people refer to her when they speak of Miriam. They say, oh, Miriam the prophetess. Okay, fair enough. Was that really Miriam's defining characteristic? There's no story of her getting any prophecy in the Torah. That's a little bit surprising for that to be her name. Like Aaron is Aaron the priest because he's doing the priestly duties all the time. So we know from Micah that she's this huge leader right on like the top tier with Moses and Aaron. We know from the sea that she's a prophetess, so much of a prophetess that she's called the prophetess. But we don't even know about any prophecy or any, like, we don't really have stories of prophecy and leadership. It's sort of ironic. So, you know, here's an interesting thing to kind of think about. When you think about the time in the desert, even though we don't know that much about Miriam's practical leadership, the only time we see of her leadership is like this one verse at the sea where she's dancing and singing and praising, and then everyone, all the women follow her. So we see that she's a role model, but besides for that, we don't know any of her teachings. But what's so astonishing is that if you pay attention to all of the stories of the deserts, all of the desert, all of these trials and tribulations that the people are just driving God crazy and just constantly sinning and going off, like off the rails, the women are noticeably never involved in the major sins. Like look at the sin of the spies. The punishment, it says, goes specifically on to the men who were in the counting above age 20, who'd been counted, those who were fit to be warriors because they were preparing to go in the land before the sin of the spies. The women didn't take part in that, so they were not punished. We know that the women didn't want to take part in the calf. The Midrash says that the men had to like tear the gold away from the women because they were trying to stop the men from sinning with the calf. The sin of Korach, we don't hear any women saying, hey, we're rebelling against Moses. The sin with the Midianites and the worship of the Midianite gods, we're not told of any Jewish women taking part in that. On the contrary, whenever we hear Israelite women doing something in the desert, it always is something good, like the daughters of Slachad who are begging to get a portion in the land and to protect their father's name and carry his name on. They love the land, they love their family. So, with however little we know about Miriam compared to her brothers, we know that she was a leader and we know that the women looked up to her. And so, if you just look in like an outcome sort of aspect of things, her leadership of the women seems to have been surprisingly more effective at generating like complete righteousness than the leadership of Moshe and Aaron, who had to struggle with these rebellious men all day long. So we don't know that much about Miriam, but we do know that she's a great prophetess and a great leader, top tier with her brothers, and that the women in her generation seemed to have been really blessed by her leadership. So if we know all of that, we know she's a leader and a prophetess, and she had this powerful impact. Who is she? Who is she? What was so inspiring about her? We only have 3 stories, and one of them is her speaking ill of Moshe. So if we're looking for positive stories, then really we only have 2. One is when she's looking over baby Moshe, and one is when she's singing and dancing at the sea. That's it. So each story is super short. At the sea, it's like a verse, but it's not even a story. So we have to unpack this really carefully. You guys ready to buckle up? Okay. Okay, so at the story at the sea, Rashi, have we talked? Does everybody here know who Rashi is? I see a lot of thumbs up. Okay, so Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki is considered like the greatest of the Torah commentators because his reading was so close. He could always notice these small details in the text that we would so easily miss. He says, look at this verse. When it says Miriam the prophetess, it doesn't say Miriam the prophetess, daughter of Amram. It says Miriam the prophetess, brother of Aaron. Well, that's a little strange, right? I mean, Aaron's amazing, but we're literally at the sea where like Moses is holding up this big staff and he's ready to go. If you were going to reference her to somebody, imagine like Donald Trump is on the stage and like somebody's related to him and you're like, oh yeah, he's related to Donald Trump. She's related to Donald Trump's brother. Like he's the main star of the show. You would think that you would say the sister of, that the Torah would say sister of Moshe, but it says Miriam the prophetess, sister of Aaron. So Rashi says that's hinting to you. You don't really know about her prophecy, but you want to know about her prophecy? Her prophecy was received when she was only the sister of, like when she was the sister of Aaron, meaning before Moses was born, because otherwise she would be, why would she be referred to as only the sister of Aaron? So now what do we know about that time? Well, she was a little girl. And at that time, when she was just the sister of Aaron and Moshe hadn't been born yet, there was a decree to kill the babies. And she was living in a time where it was terrifying to give birth because you would almost inevitably lose your baby. So Rashi is kind of hinting to us there's some kind of prophecy that Miriam had during that time. He's referencing us to a famous tradition in the oral Torah. And it says like follows about the verse in the beginning of the book of Exodus, where it says that a man from the house of Levi went and took the daughter of a daughter of Levi. It says, where did he go? Meaning the question here is, why does the book of Exodus start out by telling us that the parents of Moshe got married? We know that Moshe was the youngest of three children. His parents were clearly already married. So what does it mean that a man went out of the house of Levi and married a daughter of Levi? Where did he go? So Rav Yehuda bar Zavina, Rabbi Yehuda the son of Zavina, said, he went following the advice of his daughter. It was taught. Amram was the greatest of the generation. And when he saw that the wicked Pharaoh said, every son that is born to you shall be cast into the Nile, he said, we are toiling in vain. So he arose and divorced his wife. And then everyone arose and divorced their wives. So this makes perfect sense, right? Like if you lived in a time where babies were snatched, you would likely stop having babies. His daughter said to him, Father, your decree is harsher than Pharaoh's, for Pharaoh decreed only against the males, but you have decreed against both the males and the females. Pharaoh decreed only in this world, but you have decreed in this world and the next. So she said to her father, yes, you'll likely lose a son, but now you're stopping girl babies from getting life. And what does it mean? He decreed in this world, but you have decreed in this world and the next, because we know that a baby that would, God forbid, die in innocence would go to, would in the next world be beloved by Hashem and have died like completely pure. So you're not even allowing souls to come into the world to then return to God in heaven. It says, with the wicked Pharaoh, it is doubtful whether his decree will be fulfilled or not. Like we don't know if his decree will always be successful. People might be able to escape or to hide their babies, but you, a righteous man, your decree will certainly be fulfilled. Meaning, if you stay divorced from mom, then there's no chance of any souls coming into this world. And here comes her prophecy. He says, and she said, my mother will give birth to a son who will save Israel. And when Moses was born, the entire house was filled with light. Her father stood up and kissed her on the head and said to her, my daughter, your prophecy has been fulfilled. Meaning when like they see that this baby is so special, they're all like, wow, Miriam, you're amazing. But when they had to cast him into the Nile, her father stood up and struck her on the head and said to her, my daughter, where is your prophecy now? And this is what is written, and his sister stood from afar to know what would be done to him, to know what would become of her prophecy in the end. Is that an amazing story? So this is a story, it appears in many different permutations throughout thousands of years of tradition. It seems to, this story is coming to solve three problems. First of all, why is she called a prophet? Like we need to have some kind of prophecy to make that make sense. Why does the book of Exodus start by talking about her dad marrying her mom when we know that they were already married because they had two kids? And third, why is she so invested in this baby? You don't see sisters all over Egypt chasing around little baskets. Why is she so invested in following around this particular baby? So now imagine being Miriam. You get this vision. You see that something really special is going to happen. You feel driven to try to support your parents in continuing to build their family. And you tell them, I'm having this message from God that like there's a really important soul that needs to come into the world. And then he's tossed in this flimsy basket into the Nile. Like imagine the doubt that would creep into your mind about the word of Hashem that you had so confidently pressed people to listen to. Imagine how guilty she would feel, like the suffering that she caused her parents and her baby brother. If I was in Miriam's place, I think I would have locked myself in my room and fallen into like the deepest depression. But Miriam doesn't get depressed. It says in Exodus 2:4, his sister stood far off to know what would be done to him. So now just thinking about that verse for a second, it's a little bit of a strange story. Like, who should be standing there when there's a baby in the river? Wouldn't the first choice be like if you've already gone to the trouble of putting your baby in a basket, like who should be watching the basket? You would expect that the baby's parents would be watching the basket, right? It's a little bit strange. But here's this little girl, and there's this really interesting word that's used here. In Hebrew, to stand, the usual word to be like for standing is to la'amod. But in this case, when it describes Miriam standing, it uses a less common word and it says vatityatzeb. It's kind of like if I would stand up and show you, I'm going to show you guys like the difference between just like standing and talit yatzeb in Hebrew. Okay. You guys watching? Okay. This is me. Oh, sorry. Let me see if I can. Okay. This is me standing. Okay. This is me standing. And this is talit yatzeb. Do you guys see like a little bit of a difference? One is like standing. And then there's like, I'm standing. Like I am mityatsev. That is like a real standing. And so when Miriam, like if you were watching a baby that's about to like float off into his horrible doom, how would you be standing by the river? I'd be kind of standing like, oh God. I'd be standing like very crushed. She's not standing like that. She's using this, the Torah is using this very unusual word to describe her standing. It's standing like a pillar. She is standing up. And now she's not just standing up, like defending him. She's not doing anything really. She's just watching him. What does it say? She's standing to know what would be done to him. Like she's standing and she's looking. She's looking at this baby. Like, what is the normal kind of I'm looking at all of your faces. Like, what would be the face you would make if like there was a baby floating around in the water and like about to be like, I don't know, gobbled up by like Nile creatures? What would be your faces? Okay, so I went to get my car washed for Passover 2 days ago, and I'm sitting there on the sidewalk waiting for them to finish washing my car, and then this very old lady is driving her car, and she just crosses the lane over. There was an oncoming bus in the opposite lane. Now, thankfully, the bus driver slammed on his brakes and stopped just in time. I'm like, okay, but I wasn't thinking. It was too fast to actually think. But my reflex, you know what my reflex was? It was like that bus is about to crush that old lady. My reflex is like, I don't want to see old lady crushed by bus right now. Not on purpose. I wasn't trying to like be insensitive to her smushing. I was just that is my instinct is to want to not look at impending doom, right? But think back to like Hagar. As like horrible it is, like I always get really uncomfortable in that verse when she like kind of throws Ishmael under the bush. But you can kind of like, I mean, it's not like grade A mothering to like toss your thirsty son under a bush. I'm not supporting this parenting approach, but but you can but you can kind of understand like somebody just like not wanting to see something horrible. And in the face of almost certain disaster, Miriam has this posture and this posture. right? She's standing there like, what is her reason to know what to be done with him? And that's such a strange wording because what is there to watch? It's a baby in a basket. Like this is not like awesome reality TV. It's a baby in a basket, no food. If he doesn't fall out and drown, then he'll like be gobbled up by something or die of hunger or thirst. There's nothing to be done for him. It's just going to happen. If she goes out to try to help him, the Egyptians will like pounce all over her. Why is her posture so strong? Her posture is so strong because she's holding tight to this knowledge, this confidence that Hashem's salvation is going to unfold. And her posture is not one of fear, but one of like a spirit of curiosity. She's saying, I'm wondering how this is going to unfold. You know, one of my favorite characteristics of my youngest daughter, Chen, is that she just always has this curious, kind of non-judgmental spirit. Like she needed to get a bunch of medical things, and most of my other kids would be like, "Oh, I don't want to. This is so annoying. I'm scared. Oh, what's the doctor going to do?" And you know, as we're going in the hospital, like from room to room, she's like, I wonder what's going to be in this room. And I wonder what the doctor is going to do in that room. I wonder what kind of equipment he's going to have in that room. And I always think like, that's so great. Imagine going through all of life like that. Like instead of being afraid of what's going to happen, she's like, I wonder what's going to happen tomorrow. And and so I see Miriam in this verse, like she's standing there like, I wonder what's going to happen. How is Hashem? It's not a question of is Hashem's salvation going to come? It's how. And so that's why she's like wondering, like, she's like, I know the end of the story. I know that there's salvation coming. I just cannot wait to see how Hashem is going to make this play out. And and so there's something here that's so beautiful, just like encapsulated in this word or in this small verse of Miriam having just as at such a young age as a little girl having this kind of salvation that she's seen and having this confidence in it where she knows I don't know how it's going to play out, but I know it will. You know, I'm going to tell you guys a story that I've never actually said in any like internet forum. I want to tell you guys, I had this one, I think back to like this one moment of life where this Miriam story really speaks to me. And I've never told this story before, but it's a story of how I met my husband, Jeremy. And so I know you guys all know us really well, but I'm pretty sure that none of you guys know this story. So maybe a few people. If you guys have been to our house, then maybe you know this story. But if you haven't been to our house, then you probably don't know it. So I moved to Israel when I was about 14 and a half. And I was invited to be on this student council. And I was like, wow, I'm going to meet people. I'm going to be on this student council. And suddenly I walk into this room and I see this boy a couple of years older than me. And I'm just a little girl. I'm only 14, but I get the clearest vision of myself standing with him under the wedding canopy. Like I just see it like a movie in front of my eyes. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I see my wedding canopy right now. This person is with me under the wedding canopy. And so imagine I'm 14 years old. He was like a boy from my neighborhood. So like I spent the next 4 years trying to get this boy to know me and to notice me. And I would kind of like take the long way around, like to get home, like walking past his house. Maybe he'll notice me. And I'd kind of like, you know, if I like hear that he's going somewhere, I would sort of like stumble over to that. Like if like I hear that he's like praying a certain synagogue, I would sort of stumble over there to make sure I just like kind of happen to like accidentally be there. And after a few years, he finally notices me and finally asks me out. And we're starting to date. And I'm like, this isn't going anywhere. Like, hello. And then he kept on breaking up with me. And I just kept being like, how does he not understand that he's under the wedding canopy with me? Like, I've seen this so clearly. And I would be like talking to his friends and trying to get back together with him. And like, I'm like, because I am on a mission from the Lord. I have seen what I've seen and I know exactly what needs to happen. And anyway, long story short, he breaks up with me. This is Jeremy's best friend. So this is my husband's best friend. And so, of course, who do I go crying to? I go crying to Jeremy. I'm like, he's not getting it. This boy is not understanding. Anyway, I'm talking to Jeremy, talking about all my problems and how come this guy just doesn't have like faith in my vision that I've gotten from Hashem. Anyway, nutshell, fast forward 2 weeks, Jeremy and I get engaged and we're married, thank God, for 23 years. Now, why do I tell you this story? Because in Jewish weddings, as you guys probably know, there's always, you need to have, usually the groom's two closest friends are the witnesses under the canopy. So suddenly I'm under the wedding canopy with my beloved husband or my husband to be, and he's standing next to me. And I look across, and who do I see? That very boy I saw at the student council. But I was so locked in on how this vision was supposed to play out that how much I cried and I prayed and I was so upset every time he broke up with me. But the reality was is I was not having the curious spirit to see like, okay, I wonder how Hashem is going to allow this to play out. Because eventually it did play out and it played out exactly like in that vision. But I was just so locked into a certain way that it should happen that I couldn't let go. So if you look at Aaron in that story, he's like, great, look at this baby. He was born. The house is filled with light. Oh, I love you, Miriam. Your prophecy came true. And then when they take away the baby, he's like, yeah, what's up with your prophecy? Sorry, did I say Aaron? I meant Amram, her father. And what's up with your prophecy? Your prophecy is so worthless because it wasn't playing out in the way he expected it to play out. But Miriam doesn't fall into that trap. She goes, I'm open to how I just want to see how it's going to play. I know it will, but I just want to see how. Now, what does that open heart allow her to do? What is that sort of non-judgmental, just expectation, but like with a completely uh like open mind as to how it's going to happen? What does that actually lead to? Because what happens is that Moses is saved by none other than the daughter of Pharaoh. And while his parents had already gone home hopelessly, Miriam was waiting in this sort of quiet, confident way. And she was in the right place at the right time to offer the perfect wet nurse to take care of her baby brother. Now, think about what, like, we just sort of read that and it's like, oh, yeah, great, found like a nursing mom for him. No, this was the turning point in the story. Because imagine if she hadn't been there and the daughter of Pharaoh had just found this baby and took him into the palace and he grew up among Egyptians. Would he have been Moses? He would have grown up just like in under the evil empire. But she was there. She didn't like turn her head away. She stayed there and she made all the difference because he grows up in his most formative years in a God-fearing home, knowing the difference between right and wrong. He knows who he is. He knows who his brothers are. Imagine all of those young years when his mother was whispering in his ear, like, don't forget who you are. You're one of us. And his loyalty and dedication that to the Israelites didn't start when he grew up and took that fateful walk outside and saw the Egyptian hitting the Israelite. He grew up with that sense of right and wrong. Miriam created that. Miriam gave him that. If not for that, would there have really been Moses as the Moses that we know? It was that it was that posture that she had standing there at the Nile that turned the whole story around and essentially set the whole salvation and exodus into motion. So, ironically, she became, because she believed in Hashem's promises. Or it wasn't even a promise. It was like a Hashem didn't promise her anything. He like showed her that there was this salvation coming. She envisioned this brother, Hashem planted in her heart this understanding that her parents need to have this baby because he's going to be important. Because she stayed loyal to that, she actually became a partner in creating it because Hashem uses her because she's saying, I'm ready. If she had gone home, Hashem would have found another way, just like Mordecai says to Esther, like in the end of the story, the Jewish people are going to survive. The question is if you're going to be part of the story. So she has to go through this whole transformation. So Miriam says, I know the end of the story. Use me. I'm ready to be the vessel in the world. So then she goes beyond just being a prophetess to being an actual mover and shaker, this vector for the salvation. And there's something else in this word that I can't get out of my mind. there's one other woman in the Torah that this unique word for standing of that this sort of root word of kind of standing is used for. And it's really going to surprise you, I think. I want to go back to the story of Lot's wife. I know it's like out of nowhere, right? Lot is told that Sodom is going to be destroyed and they shouldn't look back. And what does Lot's wife do? Of course, she looks back. It's like my kids. Like when I tell them, like, don't do that, of course, that's like the first thing they want to do. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this. So what happens to her when she looks back? She becomes, it says, a netziv of salt. Vatit yatsev. Do you guys hear in the Hebrew that similar, it's a similar root word that Miriam was vatit yatsev and Lot's wife becomes netziv. It's like standing like a pillar of salt. She is permanently left in this position, frozen in time forever. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this because why weren't they supposed to look back? And why would it be tempting to look back? Like, shouldn't you be encouraged to look like when Hashem's justice is being rained down in the world and like all of this like sulfur is coming down? That's like a good lesson. It's like a good life lesson. You should look at that. Why would God not want her to look? And why would she be tempted to look? Like, let's try to get in her head for a second. So, one of the interpreters of the Torah, the Radak, he says she was weak in faith, so she looked back to see if indeed the city was destroyed or not. Even though she heard, meaning she had a prophecy from actual angels telling her that it would be destroyed. So now imagine Lot's wife, okay? Why is she turning around? Because she wants to see if it really happens. What does that mean? Like, why does she care if it's being destroyed? The angel said it's an evil place. If the angels told you it's an evil place, you should be getting out of there regardless of what's going to happen, just because it's evil. What is she doing? She wants to see maybe it wasn't destroyed. Maybe it's not so bad there. Imagine she looked back and saw the sun shining and the birds chirping. What would she have done? I don't know. Might go back to that nice house. She could just go back to being in this awful place, try to keep getting away with whatever she can get away with, as long as it's not actually leading to any real retribution. So that's why she's not supposed to look back, I think, perhaps, because she's supposed to demonstrate her faith in that prophecy that she just got and leave, not because she's trying to avoid punishment, but because she wants to leave because it's the right thing to do. And then she becomes this pillar of salt. Like when she stood before Hashem, it became clear that she was meant to be in stone. She became a monument for all ages because she sort of in the exact opposite way of Miriam, like standing strong, knowing that there's going to be this fulfillment of the prophecy. She's like wavering, like, no, I'm going to play both teams. Let's see, this might happen, might not happen. I'm not sure. Let me like kind of cover all my bases. It's like, no, when you get a vision, when you get a message from God, when you get a vision, when you get a prophecy, when you know in your heart or angels have appeared to you or whatever it is, when there is a message from Hashem, a commandment from Hashem, you have to like stand up straight or I'm going to make you be standing up for the rest of your life. And we have Miriam. Her story is totally inverse. If Lot had doubt about how certain this destruction was going to be, Miriam's living in a time where the destruction seems really certain. So much so that the husbands and wives had already separated. Like people feel like this is like for sure going to end poorly. And in the face of seemingly certain destruction, she's like, we're going to do what's good. We're going to have children. We're going to make families. We're going to do the right thing. Like it's not just a moment in time that she's having this posture. It's her entire life posture is to just say like, we are doing what is good, doing what is right, not because it's easy for us or because it's comfortable for us, but because we're just committing to that no matter what. She's like the exact opposite of Lot's wife, who's like, I'm cool with doing the right thing as long as it's like working out in my favor. So I just thought, okay, so that's one verse. I wanted to kind of unpack this posture that she has of Vatit Yatziv, of this way that she's standing there. Now, there's something that's really cool about this posture, this standing, when you keep on reading into the next time that we meet Miriam. When do we meet Miriam next? It's at the seashore. Now, try to imagine for a second how much when the Israelites are at the sea, imagine the deja vu that Miriam is going through. Like, what's happening? When she was a little girl, she was standing by this water and she was sort of between the option of her baby brother drowning or being caught by the Egyptians. And now here they are again, right at the water. Everything seems lost. They have the choice. You can either drown or be caught by the Egyptians. It's like what happened to her as a individual story in her childhood now is happening to her on a national level. This is just a really cool thing that I noticed for the first time when I was getting ready for this class. If you look at Exodus chapter 2, verse 3, it says that she got this basket and they put Moshe in the basket and they laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. Now, why wouldn't it be enough to just say that she put it in the Nile River? Why does it matter that she was standing among the reeds? Well, do you guys remember which sea Hashem split for us when we left Egypt? On modern maps, what do we call it? We call it the Red Sea, right? We crossed the Red Sea. Do you guys know why the Red Sea is called the Red Sea? Yes, Lisa Scott. Yes, exactly. It's like this foreshadowing because she's standing on the Nile, but where is she standing? She's not just standing in a random place on the Nile, she's standing among the reeds. The Red Sea is just a typo on the maps. It was actually called the Reed Sea, the Sea of Reeds, because it's filled with reeds. And so she's standing in this section of the Nile where it's filled with reeds. Imagine, like, as she's standing on the Sea of Reeds, the flashback that she's getting to standing on the riverbank with her brother, facing the Egyptians on the one hand and drowning on the other hand. And now think about Moshe. What were the stories that he grew up with? He was living with his family for the years, the early years following that story. He grew up on this story of his sister standing there among the reeds, watching over him, standing so confidently, just tending to him and making sure that he was okay. And now, what does he tell the people? What is Moses's commandment for the people as they're terrified with the Egyptians on one side and the sea on the other side? Exodus 14, verse 13, he says, "Fear not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today." But which word does he use here? He uses the word hityatzvu. He doesn't say stand up in the regular way. He says hityatzvu using the exact same word that described how his sister stood over his basket at the Nile. The Hebrew word chosen for his order is the same one that described Miriam. So now, once again, faced with this like almost certain catastrophe of drowning in water, Israel is guided to draw inspiration from Miriam's example from so many years earlier when she was standing confidently and peacefully and open-heartedly by the water, awaiting whatever surprises Hashem had in store on the way to fulfilling his promises. And so when you look at like the details of the story, it's like the first story was preparing her for this second story. So it's like Moshe is saying, when you face, like he's saying to the Israelites there who are like terrified, he's saying, when you're facing a situation like my sister faced when I was a baby, I mean, it's all encapsulated in this little word, but when you're facing a situation like my sister faced when you were a baby, you need to learn from her. Hityatsavu. You stand up. You don't cry. You don't run away. You don't turn away your eyes. You stand in that expectant posture. You don't wonder if there's going to be a salvation. You wonder how there will be a salvation. And then just like that, how do we know that how is the sea split? Just like the arm of Pharaoh's daughter, unexpectedly, the outstretched arm saved baby Moshe. He himself outstretches his arm and the sea splits. We're told that Hashem saved us with what? With an outstretched arm as well. They're reliving their story. The entire Exodus is a massive replay of everything that happened to Miriam at the Nile with her brother. When Hashem splits the sea, Miriam's prophecy that first prophecy that she had of salvation finally came to fruition. And she was prepared because while everyone was rushing to pack up all their stuff, Miriam took the time to bring musical instruments. But what's really remarkable about it, I think, is when you think about the time that has elapsed. You kind of read the stories in the beginning of Exodus, like, okay, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. But we know how to do like simple math, right? We know that Moshe lived to be 120, right? And we know that we were 40 years in the desert. So that means that he's 80 at the time of the Exodus. And she's his big sister. I mean, she's lived 80 years, her entire adult life of being a little girl and then being a teenager and then being a grown-up woman and becoming a mother and a grandmother. She's lived her entire adult life with this unfulfilled vision that Hashem gave her when her little brother was like before her little brother was even born. And when she leaves Egypt, she's an old woman. And she didn't know how the salvation would happen, but she knew that it would. And with all those years that elapsed, she didn't give up. And how do we know she didn't give up? Because she was literally carrying the the musical instruments to sing praise to Hashem. She was that like they're like didn't even have time to let the bread rise, but she had the presence of mind to bring the instruments that she would praise Hashem with for to thank him for this amazing salvation that she didn't know how it would take place, but she just knew that it would. And that is the moment where she receives her unique title. That is when she becomes Miriam the prophetess, because her prophecy came true, but it came true through her faith and through her strong expectant stand and through her not giving that up over the 80 miserable years that would follow that and packing up those instruments, like showing that from the time she was 5 years old until she's 85 years old, she just pulls out that music, what do you call it, like a tambourine, that tambourine, and she starts praising like she is ready. Can you imagine waiting for 80 years to like pull out those musical instruments? And then she is Miriam the prophetess, because now everything has come full circle. um Timbrels. Yes, thank you, Nina. The word was escaping me. You know what's so amazing is that in Israel, when little children, like when they pray, when they like sing songs of praise and they have their little tambourines, like in kindergartens, they're actually called Miriam tambourines. That's actually like their Hebrew name is like it's called Tuf Miriam. Like it's like part of the name of the musical instrument has Miriam's name in it because like that readiness to just thank Hashem and be in a state of praise. That she's like copyrighted that on her name. I think that's so cool because it's like every child grows up in Israel knowing that like if you want to sing and dance and thank Hashem, you do that with a Miriam instrument. So I just want to wrap up a little bit of this Miriam discussion with a beautiful teaching of Rabbi Moshe Tzvi Neria. He says, why didn't he ask? He says, Miriam succeeded in her educational work more than her two brothers. He says, it's surprising that Moshe, a man of God, and Aaron, holy to Hashem, were not able to elevate the masses of the people to the desired spiritual level. But Miriam, their sister, not only acted, she actually succeeded. How did this happen? It seems that the secret of educational success depends on the depth of the connection between the educator and the student. Moshe taught, he spoke, he rebuked. Aaron had the Torah of truth in his mouth and his love of peace. He embraced the entire camp of Israel. Even the women held him in high regard. But Miriam, in addition to her teaching and guidance, had a history of acts of kindness that she began already at a young age in Egypt. She sang with the women. She danced with them. This created a deep personal connection between Miriam and her students, the women. And that connection had a decisive impact. What Moshe and Aaron did not merit, Miriam did. He asks, why were the women so righteous in the desert? It's because they had Miriam. She didn't just teach them. She was with them. She exemplified something throughout her life. She was a living example. She wasn't just teaching. She was being with them. And when it was time to sing praise and thank Hashem for this prophecy coming true, she gathers all the women together and she elevates them. They experience what it is to be a woman of valor just by being around Miriam, by being around that kind of unwavering faith. All of the women were elevated in that generation. And I think that that's just, I mean, we're just touching like the tip of the iceberg of Miriam, but I think that she can really have a lot to like lead us into having a beautiful and meaningful Passover, because we know that the pattern of salvation, you know, I heard something so beautiful from Rabbi Sachs. He said that the idea of Pesach is to take historic national salvation and draw that into our own personal lives, create a salvation in our own lives and in our own homes. And so Miriam, I think, is the perfect example of how she was able to live out salvation, live out her emuna, her faith in Hashem's word in every action that she did, in every step of the way, however long it took.